Okay, so we've had 5 breakouts. How were the afternoon breakouts, everybody? Good? No, the theme of this conference is take the offensive. Getting off of defense, not being apologetic for capitalism, freedom, personal liberty. And if you use the material that was presented to you in the 5 breakout sessions today, you will be successful. You might not be successful every time, in every situation, every race, but you will be successful. We're going to do that continually. We're going to train people between conferences. We do training all over the state. This conference was a big project to put together. It ended up costing a total of about $20,000 to get it all in. And that's a significant portion of our budget, but it costs about that much to do training for the rest of the year. And so if you saw value in what you experienced today, I would like you to consider making a financial contribution to Western Liberty Network. Western Liberty Network is a 501c3 organization. Your contributions are tax deductible. And in front of you are envelopes with contribution forms that you can use to leave contributions here today if you want to, or mail them at another time when it's more convenient for you. And if you can't, not everybody can, that's okay. We do not charge for our training out in the field when we work between conferences, and we are about spreading the word. And what we want to do this year is to ask as many of you and as many activists as we can find to run for some local nonpartisan office to get elected. This is how we slowly, from the grassroots, change the fabric of our political culture. We're going to do something additional this year too. With Mike Learman's help, we're going to go over the SEL 190 forms that were used in previous elections for people that are limited government but did not win. And we will use the email addresses and phone numbers on those forms to contact them and ask if they are interested in running again, and offering them training if they decide they do want to run again. So we're going to focus on 2 things in the coming months. We're going to focus on training people to run for local nonpartisan office, and we're going to focus on being a good citizen legislator because the legislature is in session. Then after the May election, we're going to focus on training the newly elected office holders how to serve in office and not get subsumed by the Borg, as it were. This work is never done. Eternal vigilance is the price of liberty, and that's true. But today we take the offensive. Today we take personal responsibility for our own self-governance. And whether you are a conservative, a Republican, a big L libertarian, or a small L libertarian, this is all key to the future of our freedom. I am very proud now to introduce somebody who identifies as a libertarian, Katherine Timpf. She is our keynote speaker for the day. She was taught at Hillsdale College. How about that? So her head did not get filled up with mush that she didn't have to clean out afterwards. She is a regular on the Greg Gutfeld show, which I never miss. And ever since we got this organized and Kat agreed to do this, we're always like, oh, there's Kat, there's Kat, there's Kat. And she a couple days ago was on Outnumbered. Yeah, and she also had a show for a while called The Specialists, and she is a real up-and-comer. I don't know how much they pay you at Fox, but you're going to have books, you're going to have shows, you're going to have everything, and that's awesome because you're going to be spreading the good word. So I would love to introduce Katherine Timpf. Thank you.
Thank you guys so much. Thank you all for being here. Today I'm going to talk a little bit about the importance of getting involved in state and local politics. I'm going to start with a quick little story. Last year, a man named Cliff Farmer was running for city council in Arkansas, and that was great on him for getting involved, right? Running for city council. But apparently he didn't get involved enough because he wound up missing out on the chance to actually vote for himself in the election. You know what happened? Yeah, the vote wound up being 223 to 223. And then he lost in a roll of the dice to his opponent. So this is a true story. And if the man had just put in enough effort to vote for himself, he would have actually won the election. It's very easy to ignore local politics because we kind of feel like sometimes they don't matter as much. Local political stories very rarely get the same kind of attention as national ones do, and it seems like the only time that a local story really makes the national news if it involves like someone swinging at a McDonald's employee over a straw, or like a man eating someone's face, or a woman threatening to kill someone at Dollar Tree. But enough about Florida. Just kidding. Love anyone here from Florida? I love Florida. Very nice weather in Florida. No, but local and state politics, they don't seem to have the same appeal to people as national politics do. Whether it's actually running for these offices or even simply voting in these elections, even apparently if you are actually running. As I'm sure you all know, voter turnout is lower for primary and local elections. According to fairvote.org, 2018 had the highest midterm turnout in history at 49.6%. The highest midterm turnout in history is not even half of people voting. So I have a very booming voice, yeah. Very deep, very masculine voice for a lady. That's unacceptable because the truth is a lot of difference can be made at the state and local level. A lot of wonderful things can happen if small government conservatives and libertarians get involved at the state and local level, and a lot of terrible things can happen if we don't. I know what you're thinking. But I'm a libertarian. I hate the government. I don't want to get involved in what I hate. That may be true. But we really do need some real-life Ron Swansons out there. A lot can happen at the local level, both good and bad. I'm from New York City, and that is a place where I know the local government could use a lot of work. Have you ever been to New York? I do not understand. I do not understand it. I pay so much in taxes. Why is there trash literally everywhere? There's garbage everywhere. Where is all my money going? There's garbage everywhere. The subway's unreliable. I can't carry a gun, which is unconstitutional. I don't know how that was ever allowed, the fact that I'm not allowed to protect myself in New York City. It's something that's always been very frustrating to me. I do like some local laws. I like the one where we can keep the bars open till 4 a.m. I like that one. Although, as a libertarian, I would change the law to keep the bars open whenever you damn well want to. There's always someone somewhere who needs a drink, okay? But I'll take what I can get. But I always go out and I vote in local elections. And it's tough for me as a libertarian because I only vote for libertarians, which means I end up writing in my cat a lot. Because, I mean, there's not always a libertarian running, but I still get out and vote. Maybe I'll even get to run someday. I don't know. We'll see where life takes me. But it's not just New York, and I think a great place to look at where things can go bad with local government would be to look at San Francisco. I don't know if you guys know this. Very expensive to live in San Francisco. The median cost of a single-family home in San Francisco is 5 times the U.S. average. And if you don't want to be part of the city's huge, and it's very huge, homeless population, then you have to be pretty well off to live there. And this isn't no one's fault. In fact, a lot of it is the city's fault. It's the local government's fault. Because it's almost impossible to build new housing. 80% of the buildings that are standing in San Francisco right now were already standing there in 1980. And it's not because people haven't tried to build new buildings. And I'm going to tell another story about a man named Bob Tillman who spent 5 years and $1.4 million engaged in legal battles in San Francisco trying to be able to convert his coin-operated laundromat into housing. He wanted to turn it into an 8-story, 75-unit apartment building. Sounds great, right? Get more housing in San Francisco. And it shouldn't have been a problem because nobody was living above the laundromat. It wouldn't have displaced anybody. The site was already zoned for housing. Really seemed like it should have been non-issue. Good to go. Let's get more housing in San Francisco. Let's do it. We can bring prices down. We can, help with the homeless population. This was in 2013, and Tillman had had the laundromat there for 20 years. But there's just one more thing he had to do. He was required to get permission from city officials for new construction. That's when the problem started. But he went about doing that. 2014, the paperwork, the environmental review, the public hearings, yada, yada, yada. So fast forward a few years, a lot of red tape later, it's late 2017, he's finally done. The Planning Commission's ready to vote on the project. But then some more problems started. The first roadblock was when the commission ordered a detailed historical review. Yes, a historical review of a place that had been a freaking laundromat for decades. Like, unless like Jesus Christ walked in once and had to wash his robes with some Babylonian quarters one day, I am having a hard time figuring out why this would be such a concern. It was a laundromat. Seems like it'd be pretty easy to say this is not a historical site of significance. It's where people bring their dirty underwear to wash it. But you would be wrong. It took 4 months, a 137-page study. 137-page study of a laundromat, people. And $23,000 of Tillman's own money just to find out that, aha! This laundromat has no historical significance. But it still was not over. San Francisco city law states that any individual or group can pay $617 to appeal a decision by the Planning Commission. And one organization did that. It was like a super social justice organization that was aimed at stopping gentrification of the Mission, which was traditionally a working class Latino community that was apparently worried that this apartment building would displace low-income residents. Here's some truth. That's not necessarily the case. Todd Davis, the executive director of the nonprofit San Francisco Housing Action Coalition, said, "Displacement's happening because there's not enough damn housing." It's my words, not his. But his words were, when you have people with resources competing with people with fewer resources for a limited commodity, who's going to end up with that commodity? The people with more resources, exactly. Plus, San Francisco already has all kinds of laws in place aimed at stopping gentrification. There's even a law that requires that new buildings set aside part of their apartments for subsidized housing. Tillman, he was down for this too. 11% of the units in his building were going to be available only to families that earn less than 55% of the area's median income. But the organizers of this group were saying, not enough. So it all got delayed again. But in November, the Planning Commission approved it anyway. But then the group appealed again to San Francisco Board of Supervisors. Then during that hearing in June 2018, a new issue was brought up. Citing the California Environmental Quality Act, they expressed some worry that the building would, you ready for this? Cast a partial shadow on a playground next door. They voted to delay the project because it would cast a partial shadow, which might be kind of nice. You would have the option of both sun and shade on the playground next door. So Tillman also thought this was ridiculous, and he sued. Thankfully, he had the option of suing. That's very, very rare. Developers normally can't sue because they're worried about the fear of retaliation. This was Tillman's only project, so he actually had the luxury of suing. And then when he sued, something magical happened. The board, 2 months later, suddenly decided to approve his project. They suddenly decided that a partial shadow on the park maybe wasn't an environmental catastrophe. But it was, if you can't tell, an incredibly daunting experience for Tillman. It is hard to build housing in San Francisco. And the people without resources and the time that Tillman had might have given up a lot sooner than he did. How difficult it is has probably stopped a lot of people from even wanting to try in the first place. If there were some conservatives or some libertarians in San Francisco city government, then it might be a little bit easier and there might not be such a housing crisis in the city. Another example of bad local government policy can be found in Santa Barbara. I'm going to talk about straws. You guys ready to talk about straws? Anybody here like straws? Yeah, me too. I like straws too. In the summer of last year, the city passed an ordinance that would allow restaurant employees to be punished with up to 6 months in jail or a $1,000 fine for a second offense of handing out a straw to their customers. I'm sure a lot of you guys have heard about this, right? And here's the thing, each individual, I don't know if you knew this, each individual straw counted as a separate infraction. Meaning that if someone got busted handing out straws to a table of 4 people, he or she could end up facing years behind bars. Now, I'm a reasonable person, okay? I may be a libertarian, but I'm glad that we live in a society with laws. For example, I am glad that if a person murders another person, then that murderer has to go to prison. That seems totally fair to me. But 6 months in jail for handing a sliver of plastic to another person? I feel like you'd have to be bananas to think that that's even close to fair. This is especially true when you consider just how small of an impact straws have on the environment. Straws represent, get this, 0.02% of the amount of plastic waste that is estimated to go into the ocean each year. And on top of that, the United States is responsible for only about 1% of the total amount of plastic waste that's in the ocean overall. We're talking about very, very small. All things considered, this new ordinance wouldn't make a real dent in the problem it was intended to solve, but it could create some harm. Straw bans could end up having a negative impact on disabled people who can't drink without them. Plus, straws are awesome. I'm not afraid to admit that I own a few of my own. They can help protect your teeth from stains when you're drinking dark liquids. They can help you avoid the germs that can be on cans or restaurant glasses. They can also reduce the risk of choking, and I have to say, I want to live. If you are an individual hippy-dippy business that wants to do its hippy-dippy part and maybe set a hippy-dippy in-house policy against straws, then fine. I'm sure in Santa Barbara you might get a lot of hippy-dippy clientele who would be more than happy to support your efforts. But there are just some things that the state should not be involved in, and I feel like a business's offered drinking tools definitely falls into that category. I mean, could you imagine, thank you. Could you imagine ordering a smoothie and just being expected to smash it into your actual face? Instead of drinking from a straw? What about those big fishbowl type drinks, ladies? That we like to drink when we're out with our girls, right? Those big drinks with all the straws. Offering one of those without straws seems perhaps inhumane. And definitely less conducive to photos showing how cute we look drinking out of them. Anyway, like I said, I have absolutely no problem with individual businesses making the decision to stop using plastic straws. But getting the government involved in what people choose to drink liquids out of seems like a bit of a stretch. And sending people to jail over it is asinine. Thankfully, Santa Barbara changed its mind, and eventually, by the fall, it announced it had removed the jail time portion out of the bill. That's great. But what's even more great is probably the reason that they removed it was because of the huge public outcry against it. In other words, it's probably the case that a huge amount of people weighing in to voice their concerns with a local story about local government truly made a difference and actually kept people out of jail for handing a sliver of plastic to someone, which would make no environmental difference anyway. The truth is, local governments that are lacking in significant representation from people who believe in small government are responsible for all kinds of terrible laws. Another example of a bad law that we see coming up frequently is high taxes on things like soda, or pop. I'm from Detroit, I call it pop. But I'm going to call it soda because I know where I am right now. Not to brag, but I know where I am. Now, I know that soda is bad for you. Make no mistake about that. My brother once made a joke to me that soda should be called obesity water, and I kind of thought that was a pretty good idea. But still, placing penalty taxes on it can be really bad for cities because it can be bad for their businesses. At the beginning of this year, one grocery store owner in Philadelphia announced that he would be having to close his business, and he claimed the reason for the closure was that the city's tax on soda and other sugary drinks had accounted for a 23% loss in sales, which had made the store completely unprofitable. Basically, when the sales tax hit, based on the location of the store, it was easy for consumers to just go west or south and leave the city of Philadelphia and get cheaper drinks. Reason Magazine wrote about this one too and found that the store owner blaming the closure on the tax was way more than a hypothetical. A report found that the soda sales inside the city limits fell by 55% since the tax took effect, but went up 40% outside the city. So people were drinking a little bit less soda, sure, but mostly just getting it from somewhere else and bringing the money that could have been going to your city's businesses to the businesses outside the city. And they had to drive further, which means more emissions, which I'm surprised no liberals talked about this, because this means more emissions into the air for having to drive further. But hey, if you're anything like me, you would never have voted for such a tax. If you're anything like me, you'd understand this is America. And in America, we know that many patriots fought and died for our rights to live as a free people. And the freedom to get as fat as we damn well please should absolutely be considered among those rights. Yes. All right. I have another example here of a local government getting what I would consider to be far too involved, and I'll bet you'll agree with me on this one. In 2016, a single mom was facing a year in jail. Want to know why? She sold a plate of ceviche, as in raw fish dish, to an undercover cop. I'm serious. She was cited by Waukegan County for selling a, quote, illegal substance. An illegal substance, because she didn't have a permit to sell food. What an elaborate sting operation they must have orchestrated over there to bring down such a high-profile criminal, right? You might think that a single mother trying to use her cooking skills to supplement her income is not a reason for her to potentially be taken away from her children, but San Joaquin County Deputy District Attorney Kelly McDaniel insisted that selling food without a health department inspection puts the person eating it in considerable danger. And it isn't fair to the business owners who do get permits. Okay, Kelly, a few things. One, if eating food not subject to health department inspection really does amount to putting yourself in real danger, I must be adventurous as hell. Not to brag, but when I go to friends and family members' houses for dinner, I don't even bother to ask whether or not the spaghetti and meatballs they're serving had been inspected by government officials before I eat it. That's right. I just eat it. I am a daredevil. 2, if there's a small ceviche business owner in Stockton who is actually being affected by the charged woman's Facebook actions, I will eat my own foot. I think that her selling a plate of ceviche here and there is not being detrimental to any other businesses. All right, I'm going to switch for a second from talking about the very local level and move to something a little bit bigger, which is the state level of government. You may not realize it, but huge things can be done to make changes at the state level, especially things that are more important to many libertarians, such as civil liberties and criminal justice reform. So this is for the libertarians in the room. I know I'm in Portland. Any Portland libertarians ever hear of a thing called marijuana? You've heard of it before? I smelled some on the street when I was downtown. But marijuana policy, honestly, marijuana policy serves as a great example of how huge changes can be made at the state level without having to involve the federal government. As you know, marijuana is technically still illegal at the federal level, but it doesn't mean it's not legal in a lot of states, including this one. Personally, I see this as a very good thing, and I'm proud of all the activists in the cannabis industry. Yes, I'm a little radical, so don't chase me off stage. I'm a libertarian. I'm one of those wacky Ron Paul libertarians who believes that all drugs should be legal, which might be too radical for this crowd and probably for most crowds, so I understand that. But one thing I've never been able to understand is why weed is illegal. It's never killed anyone. Like, how's alcohol legal and weed's not legal? It's ridiculous it hasn't changed in the federal level, in my opinion, but I think it's been great to see so many states take matters into their own hands and really make a difference. In my opinion, it's just wrong to lock people up over a plant, to keep them separated from their families and their children over a plant. I think it's an injustice, and it's thanks actually to state government that injustice has ended in so many places. And guess what? It seems to be going well for those states and their economies too. In fact, as of June 2018, the cannabis industry has created upwards of 160,000 full-time jobs throughout the country. By 2017, recreational sales revenue in Colorado alone, reached $1.1 billion, while medical sales were $417 million for a combined total of $1.5 billion. Colorado alone. This revenue generated more than $247 million in tax revenue. That's a lot of cash. Just to put it in perspective, that's enough money to build a 100-mile 2-lane road in a rural area, or 22 miles worth of urban interstate, which is actually enough interstate to go all around Manhattan, just from the tax revenue in 2017 alone, from marijuana in Colorado alone. So next time someone asks you, who will build the roads? Be like, the potheads will, you know? But Colorado and local governments are getting to do all kinds of wonderful things with this new source of tax revenue. For example, Adams County has used its cannabis sales tax to award $1.5 million in 4-year college scholarships to 114 low-income students. Isn't that great? Isn't that great? But there are still some states that need some work in the cannabis area. One of these is Wyoming. Not so progressive over there when it comes to marijuana. Last summer, a 50-year-old woman named Anita Maddox was charged with a felony for possessing a sample bottle of CBD oil from a New Mexico health food store. Not even weed, CBD. CBD. She had to spend 36 hours in jail, and she was facing up to 5 years in prison and a $10,000 fine. Thankfully, the state of Wyoming decided to drop the charges. That was a good decision made at the state level. But the fact that there are still many states where you can technically go to prison for a non-psychoactive, in other words, doesn't even get you high. I feel like if you're going to go to prison over drugs, the drug should at least be able to get you high. I think it's clear we need some small government civil libertarians in these states to get involved, whether it's through activism, or lobbying current politicians, or running for office themselves. There have been some really bad state laws out there that have gotten a lot of people into a lot of trouble that they shouldn't have been in, or a lot of people into more trouble than they should have been in. I'm going to start with a smaller, less impactful example, then I'm going to move to a more grave, serious example. In 2017, a woman in Florida was being threatened with jail time for offering unlicensed diet tips. To clarify, this person was actually not tying people up in her basement and forcing them to listen to her diet tips at gunpoint in exchange for cash. No, these were people who wanted her tips and who were choosing to pay for them. It was a completely voluntary, mutually agreed upon arrangement, and yet Florida still somehow felt the need to intervene. The state fined her more than $750 for being an unlicensed dietitian and had warned her that she will face fines of $1,000 per incident and possibly a year in jail if she continues. She got busted the same way Ceviche lady did, by the way. There was a Department of Health investigator going undercover as someone who wanted fitness advice. Yeah, like undercover operations, you don't think undercover Jenny Craig, like you just don't. The state actually thought this was worthy of an undercover operation. I bet if we had more civil libertarians in Florida, this wouldn't have happened. It's so absurd for so many reasons, right? On the most basic level, if people want to pay other people for something that isn't going to hurt anyone else, I think they should be allowed to do so. Second of all, there are plenty of licensed dietitians out there, licensed dietitians, who do not know what the hell they're talking about. You know how I know this? Because so many of them say different, if not opposite things, right? Like there's some dietitians that are like, go with the whole wheat option. And other dietitians are like, gluten is the devil. And there's some dietitians that are like, you want to have a lot of lean meats, lean meat proteins. And there's a lot of other dietitians that are like, meat's the devil. So, I mean, I don't know what's right. I just eat bagel sandwiches every day. That's my diet advice. But the fact is, some of them got to be right, and some of them got to be wrong, which means there are some people that Florida is technically allowing to give other people wrong nutritional advice just because the state says they're licensed to do so. I would say personally, as a small government gal, that if somehow you can get people to pay you to tell them what to eat, you go on with your bad self. Go right ahead. If there were more civil libertarian politicians involved at the state level here, then we wouldn't have seen something as insane as this have happened. For the second example, I'm going to talk about some very serious past criminal justice issues in Tennessee. Last year, a Tennessee man was freed after serving 11 years of a 17-year sentence for a first-time drug offense, but he should have never been sentenced, in my opinion, to so many years in the first place. His name's Calvin Bryant, and he was sentenced to 17 years, 15 of them mandatory, because of Tennessee's drug-free school laws. Drug-free schools sounds great. You don't want drugs in schools, okay? Maybe a libertarian, but I don't want the kids doing drugs in school. But it's not quite what it sounds like. And I'll get into that. I'll explain it in a little bit in a minute. What happened was he was arrested in 2008 for selling ecstasy and some other pills out of his apartment in Nashville to a confidential informant. The crime normally would have resulted in a sentence of only at least 2.5 years, but because Bryant happened to live within 1,000 feet of an elementary school, his sentence was automatically ramped up, placing his crime in the same class as second-degree murder or rape. That was what was necessary according to state law. Thankfully, Davidson County District Attorney Glenn Funk was able to convince Tennessee Attorney General's office to let Bryant plead guilty to a reduced charge and be released on time served. This is definitely a good thing. This is definitely a good thing that happened at the local level. But I don't think that any reasonable person could argue that the punishment that was originally doled out was anything but completely unwarranted given his crime. Selling pills to somebody who wants to buy pills, not the same as murdering someone. I think that we could all agree on that. See, drug-free zones are one of those things that pass that sounds like a great idea, like nobody wants their kids on drugs. I don't have kids, but I have a very high aspiration for them that when I do someday that they won't be. The thing is that drug-free zones actually make up a huge amount of Tennessee geographically. But thankfully, the district attorney's office under Funk has a policy of not charging people with this enhancement unless minors were actually involved. So thankfully, things have changed. This is a good thing. It's obviously far worse to sell drugs to children than it is to sell drugs to consenting adults. You shouldn't be punished because of laws that are aimed at stopping people from hurting children if you're not actually hurting any children. Essentially, punishing Bryant in this way amounted to punishing him for a crime he didn't even really commit. Again, I'm going to get back on my radical libertarian horse for a couple more sentences, so bear with me. As a libertarian, I do believe all drugs should be legal for adults. I believe in a truly free country. We shall have the freedom to decide what we do and do not choose to do with our own bodies. And I believe it would eliminate a lot of the violence that comes with the black market. At the very least, however, draconian laws such as this one that unfairly took so much of Bryant's life should be discarded nationwide and stay discarded. If you're not selling drugs to children, you should never have to worry about being punished as if you were selling drugs to children. Here's a fact time. It's true. Selling ecstasy a few blocks away from some kids does nothing to harm them because you actually, true story, cannot get high from being in the same neighborhood as a pill. It's as simple as that. But until my radical libertarian ideas on drugs take effect nationwide, which I'm hoping will happen someday, there's a lot that can be done at the state level to make things more fair. And this story is a great example of how that can happen. This wasn't something that had to involve the White House. This was all done at the state level. This guy is free because of what happened at the state level. And if you're passionate about criminal justice reform, as I think is a lot of both libertarians and even Republicans now are passionate about criminal justice reform, you should realize that the state level is actually a great place to start. A lot of the things that get national attention, such as the First Step Act or some of President Trump's pardons, have been federal. So it's easy to get the misconception that all criminal justice reform has to happen at the big, intimidating federal level. But that simply is not the case, and some of these stories prove that. If you're a libertarian like me, you may spend all of your time thinking about how you want like a vaping Ron Paul robot to be the president. And it's fine to want that. I know that I want that. But it's also important to know that that isn't necessary in order for there to be real change. A lot of things, both good and bad, can happen at the both state and local levels. And it takes people like us who care to get involved and make a change. Having numerous transportation options and the internet has made it easier than ever for individuals to participate in their local government. If people on horseback were willing and determined to get involved in local government back in the day, there's no excuse for you not to if you own a car and a computer or a smartphone. Yes, ma'am.
Yeah.
And that's all I have. Can I take some questions? Do I have time for questions, right? I think so. Yeah. I don't know how this works. I'm not in charge. I'm just a chick in a dress. I don't know.
I think I saw a hand up back there.
Yeah.
Yes.
Hi, Kat.
Hey.
Joey Nations.
What's that?
Thanks for being here. First of all, my question is really about 2020. So we look at our country, we see a lot of people out there who see one thing in the news versus what we see.
Right.
And I think a lot of us feel like Republicans need a fighting voice out there that's young to contrast against Ocasio-Cortez and the attention she's getting, right? Right. And so we need more young, fighting, libertarian kind of spirit getting up there. And so what are your hopes on contrasting with some of that young socialism that we see out there?
One of my favorite things to do is to use both like humor and satire. And it allows the arguments that those people make to defeat themselves. I wrote a column for National Review back when she was running, but we knew she would win. But about how she is in a way the best argument against socialism, because every time she gets in front of a camera, it's clear she has no idea what the hell she's talking about. So to kind of point those things out and have a sense of humor about it, because if you're entertaining and you have a sense of humor and you're lighthearted, that's going to attract people to at least want to listen to what you have to say. And sometimes that's all it takes.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Any other questions for the chick in the dress?
Are you on the Greg Gutfeld show tonight?
Yes, we taped it yesterday. Yes, it's a good show. We have Jimmy Fallon and Christina Parsneblis.
Any more questions for Kat? I think you blew them away.
Oh, go ahead.
Prediction for 2020, what is it? Yeah.
I think Trump's going to win in 2020. I don't know. I think that Kamala Harris, Cory Booker are going to split the black vote, so I don't think it's going to be either one of them. Elizabeth Warren, I think, is a total joke, so I hope to God it's her.
Yeah.
But I don't know. I think that we're going to see more people get into the race. I don't think that we have the complete Democratic field yet. Yeah. Anything else?
Who won't get into the race on the Democratic side?
Who won't? Hillary? I don't think she will, but I think she's so delusional that she might. She surrounds herself only with yes people, so she thinks that people really regret this country without her. I think we'd be at war with the entire world if she was elected. She makes Lindsey Graham look like a dove, comparatively.
What about Biden? I think he's the only one.
I think that he'll probably get in. I think that he regrets not getting in last time. The thing about him is he is a likable guy. Like, I have to admit, if he asked me for a beer, I'd say yes, but please don't touch me.
Where are you going to be in 10 years, or 2024? Is it Kat president? Or?
We'll see. I might have, although I don't have anything as bad in my yearbook as what we've been seeing the past 24 hours. Holy hell. Did you see, by the way, this was not a question, but did you see that CNN said that he was a Republican? You guys all see that? Shameless. Shameless. If you haven't looked it up, look it up. It's if you wanted to think in your head what's the most racist possible thing that I could concoct, it's right there.
Go ahead. Biden being, is he the son or the grandson of coal miners, does he say?
Yeah, I don't know.
Are his prospects ruined now that being a coal miner is racist?
That's true. Are you talking about Mary Poppins? You're talking about the Mary Poppins? Oh yeah, there's someone saying that the Mary Poppins scene where they have the chimney. Yeah, that's
racist.
They're saying that's blackface. I'm saying, so in addition to that, you can't be a chimney sweep, you can't be a coal miner, you can't be a mechanic, you can't do a charcoal face mask.
It wasn't Hillary who was coal miners.
Yeah, no, it wasn't.
More questions?
Any more?
How do we reach young people?
I think that the message of freedom is one that's very, very attractive to young people. If you again, like I've said this earlier, approach it from like a lighthearted perspective and don't be judgmental of where people are at. Because I have a lot of friends that are very liberal and I will talk to them about issues and I've sometimes been able to kind of turn them a little bit. When I say, well, hey, well, what about this? Well, what about this? Meet them where they're at and understand that we have the same goal. We all want to be a prosperous, wonderful country where everything's dope. Like, we all want that. We just have different ideas of how to get there. So kind of, free market is a way to get there, and it's a way to prosperity, and it's just a way to show people that, just because you're a Republican or a Libertarian doesn't mean you want people dying in the streets. It means you think that there's a better way to keep more people alive and have people be more prosperous.
Roxy?
So what's it like being a Libertarian Vox correspondent, whatever you want to call it, in New York?
It's very tough, because no one's on my team. I will get called, like a Trump bootlicker and a Hillary bootlicker in the same day sometimes, because I have different issues or different views on different issues. But I wouldn't do anything else but speak what I believe is the truth.
Let's just a couple more. Roxy?
Is Senator Merkley as ridiculous to you guys back east as he is to some of us here?
I haven't had any experience. Yeah. I know I live in New York, but...
No, since it's Groundhog Day, what do you think Oregon can do to get it right?
What do you mean in terms of...
What?
In terms of what?
Well, Groundhog Day, the movie.
Oh, okay, the movie.
We're trying to do it over and over again. We can't seem to win.
Yeah. I mean, it is tough. I think that not giving up is important. I think that using humor is important. I think that not being judgmental and condescending is important, which can be tough. And I have a tough time with it sometimes because the facts are on our side. I mean, that's the tough thing. Wouldn't it be great if everyone could have a Bentley? That'd be great. But you can't afford it, right? So, I mean, the facts are on your side. So it can be easy to want to talk down to people. But I think it's important to try to meet people where they're at. And no cause is too small. I mean, if you can change one mind, then that makes a difference. If you can change one life, that makes a difference.
Speaking of Groundhog Day, Puxatawny Phil says it will be in early spring.
Yeah.
It's already early. I mean, the weather here was great. I mean, in New York, it is hell right now. I walk outside and I'm like, what did I do to deserve this?
Okay, we'll do one more. Go ahead, Dre.
So, Kat, when it comes to the millennials, and they're looking at equality for all,
Right.
equal pay for unequal work,
Right.
social justice, and I'm not a millennial, I'm a baby boomer, and a proud baby boomer. What would we say what would you recommend?
It's quite interesting. A lot of the social justice types of things, what I like to do, I'll focus on that, is point out how they're counterproductive. Like, modern feminism right now is not feminism to me. It's all about how women need special treatment, women need this. It's about the weakness of women. It's not about the strength of women. And I consider myself a feminist, but in the real sense of the word, right? In the sense of women can do everything men can do. I'm just as capable as a man is. I don't need this, like, to be treated with kid gloves. If you say, hey, you guys, I think that's how I open my speech, right? Like, I'm not hurting anyone's feelings. I think it's just so important to meet people where they're at. Like, I know I keep repeating this, but it's important to meet people where they're at and learn why they think the way that they do. Because I write a lot about social justice for National Review. That's mostly what I write about, or I poke holes in these social justice things. So, like, learn why they think what they do, and it's very easy to poke holes in these sorts of things. But there's no one doing it. There's not a lot of people doing it because they're too afraid of being called racist or sexist or homophobic, which racism, sexism, and homophobia are very, very real things that are disgusting, and we all need to do everything we can to fight those things. But when you call certain things racist, sexist, homophobic that are not, you really minimize those real examples.
That's right. Bingo.
Yeah.
That's right.
Thank you very much.
Thanks, guys.
Okay, a couple of things before we adjourn. Kat is gracious enough to agree to meet us in the hotel bar for a brief reception where you can meet her and maybe get your picture taken with her. A couple of other things. Don't forget to consider making a contribution to Western Liberty Network using the envelopes in front of you. And even as important as that is make sure that you bring your completed evaluation sheets and drop them on the registration desk. This has been a wonderful time. This has been great. The energy in this room has been fantastic, and I want to thank you all for taking part. Get out there, take the offensive, and with that, this conference is closed. Thank you very much.